On a dark and rainy night, a mysterious man quietly breaks into a museum. Inside, a tour guide is showing visitors an old wooden mask and talking about Loki, the god of mischief. He tells everyone that this mask was created by Loki himself, and that anyone who wears it can get Loki's magical powers. But suddenly, something very strange happens. The mysterious man starts using superpowers right there in the museum and reveals that he is actually Loki himself. Everyone gets scared and starts running away in panic. Loki quickly goes to take back his mask, but when he grabs it, he realizes that the mask on display is just a fake copy. This makes him extremely angry. In his rage, Loki attacks the tour guide and puts his face inside the display case like it's another museum item. Just then, security guards rush in to stop him, but Loki fires powerful energy blasts from his fingers. Even though the guards are not hit, Loki opens a huge hole in the floor, and everyone falls down through it. The next morning, far away from the city, the real magical mask is floating in a river. After some time, a dog finds it and carries it away in his mouth. Nearby, a couple named Tim and Tanya are visiting their friends to see their newborn baby. On the way back home, Tanya asks Tim when they are going to have a baby of their own, but Tim feels that he is not ready yet and says it's not the right time. This makes Tanya upset, and even after they reach home, she is still thinking about it. Just then, their pet dog Otis walks into the house, holding the same wooden mask he found in the river. But Tim doesn't think much about it and has no idea how magical it really is. At the same time, Loki is still searching for the real mask because his father, Odin, has ordered him to find it before it creates problems on Earth. Later, Tim goes to work where he meets his boss, Daniel, who is a famous animator. Tim tries to share a new cartoon idea with him, hoping to impress him, but sadly, Daniel doesn't like the idea at all. By the end of the day, Tim goes back home and gives Tanya a small gift to say sorry for their earlier argument. Soon after that, Tim has to attend his company's Halloween party, but there's one problem. He doesn't have any costume. Tanya suggests that he should just use the wooden mask that Otis brought home. Since he has no other option, Tim decides to take the mask with him. At the party, Tim finally puts on the mask, and suddenly, it sticks to his face. Within seconds, Tim transforms into a crazy green-faced character with cartoon-like powers, just like Loki himself. Now full of energy and confidence, Tim walks into the party in a flashy and over-the-top style. But he quickly notices that the party is super boring and nobody is enjoying it. So using his new magical powers, Tim jumps onto the stage and turns the whole party into a wild, fun-filled show. Lights, music, dance, everything becomes bigger and crazier. Everyone is shocked and amazed by his performance, especially his boss. After the party, Tim, still in his masked form, goes back home and enjoys the rest of the night with Tanya. But the next morning at work, something strange happens. Everyone keeps talking to Tim about how amazing he was at the party, but Tim doesn't remember anything at all. He's completely confused. Then suddenly, his boss calls him into his office. He tells Tim that he loved the Halloween performance and now wants him to create a brand new animation idea inspired by that same show. Tim gets super excited and rushes back home to tell Tanya the good news. But Tanya also has something important to tell him. She thinks she might be pregnant. Both of them quickly go to the doctor for a checkup, and it gets confirmed. They're going to have a baby. But just then, Tanya starts feeling sick. The doctor gives her a container in case she needs to throw up. But instead of vomit, soap bubbles start coming out of her mouth. Even after this strange moment, Tim and Tanya continue living their normal life. Soon the day finally arrives when their baby is born. They named him Alvi. At the same time, Loki is still searching everywhere for the magical mask. He reaches an old warehouse where his father Odin takes control of a shopkeeper's body and talks to him. Odin tells Loki that a baby has been born with the powers of the mask, and now he must find that child and recover the mask as soon as possible. The very next day, Tim starts searching the whole house for the mask. He thinks it might help him get some new ideas for his animation work. But what he doesn't know is that Otis has already hidden the mask inside his new doghouse outside. After losing his old spot in the house because of the baby, when Tim can't find the mask anywhere, he leaves for work. Meanwhile, Tanya stays at home to take care of little Alvi. While playing with him, Tanya blows up a balloon to make him laugh. But suddenly something shocking happens. Alvi starts blowing up his own head like a balloon. This reveals that he was actually born with the powers of the mask. Before Tanya can fully understand what's going on, Alvi quickly returns to normal like nothing ever happened. But someone else sees everything Otis, and he's already jealous because Alvi took over his room. At the same time, Loki turns himself into a bee and sneaks into the hospital to search for the baby with magical powers. He finds the receptionist, scares her, and then takes her form so he can check the list of all babies born that day. Now, with that information, Loki begins his search. Meanwhile, Tim slowly starts realizing how hard it really is to be a father. Both he and Tanya spend many sleepless nights because of Alvy's constant crying. One night, Tim becomes so tired that he almost feeds the baby a light bulb instead of a milk bottle. But luckily, Alvy secretly uses his magical powers to wake Tim up before anything bad happens, and Tim doesn't even realize it. But the next morning, things get even worse. Tanya tells Tim that she has to go out of town for work for an entire week. Tim immediately starts to panic because during that same week, the TV network wants the final presentation of his new cartoon. The dates are exactly the same, which means Tim will have to stay home alone with the baby. Tim asks his boss if he can work from home so he can take care of Alvy at the same time, and surprisingly, his boss agrees. Soon, Tanya says goodbye to both of them and leaves in a taxi. Now Tim is all alone. He tries to focus on his work, but Alvy just won't stop crying. Tim tries everything to calm him down, but nothing works. Another sleepless night passes, and his boss keeps calling him again and again asking about the drawings. A few hours later, Tanya calls to check on them. As soon as Alvy hears her voice on the phone, he gets super excited and suddenly says his first word, "Mommy!" Tim gets really happy and tries to make Alvy say daddy too, but the baby refuses. Instead, Alvy says mommy again, but this time in a deep adult voice. This completely terrifies Tim. At the same time, Loki starts visiting the homes of all the babies on his hospital list. He goes to one woman's house disguised as a salesman and gives her a brand new vacuum cleaner. As the woman starts testing it, Loki secretly activates the machine, and it sucks her inside completely. With the house now empty, Loki goes to check the baby. But after looking closely, he realizes that this child has no powers at all, just a normal baby who even throws a toy at his face. Meanwhile, back at Tim's house, Tim is still trying his best to finish his work, but Alvy simply won't let him focus on anything. So finally, Tim decides to put him in front of the TV to watch some cartoons like The Flintstones and Woody Woodpecker, even though Tanya clearly told him not to do that. But right now, the only thing that matters is, it works. Alvy calms down. Tim quickly takes advantage of the moment and starts working again. He even asks Otis to watch the baby for a while, but instead of doing that, Otis goes straight outside to his doghouse and starts digging. He's looking for the magical mask he had hidden earlier. That night, Tim falls asleep while Alvy keeps watching cartoons, and at that exact moment, Otis finally finds the mask. As soon as he puts it on, he transforms into a crazy cartoon-like version of himself. Meanwhile, Alvy is watching a cartoon where a man finds a frog that sings and dances, but only when nobody else is watching. Every time someone else looks at it, the frog acts normal. Alvy enjoys the cartoon a lot without realizing that Otis, now wearing the mask, is planning to get rid of him forever. The next morning, Tim keeps working, but none of his ideas feel good enough for the big presentation. Suddenly, Alvy starts copying the dancing frog from the cartoon right in front of him. Tim can't believe his eyes. Then things get even crazier. Alvy suddenly changes his head to look like Woody Woodpecker and starts running and jumping all over the house. He runs into the kitchen, and Tim chases after him while calling emergency services, trying to explain what his baby is doing. But of course, nobody believes him. Tim then runs to his neighbor's house and tells her everything. She doesn't believe him either. He even asks Alvy to sing and dance again as proof. But just like the frog in the cartoon, Alvy acts like a completely normal baby in front of other people. Now desperate, Tim tries to shake him a little, hoping he'll do something again. But the neighbor gets angry and throws Tim out. A few minutes later, Tim comes back home and tries to calm Alvy down. But suddenly, the baby grabs Tim's leg and starts smashing him around the living room like he's a toy. Just then, Otis walks in and gives the baby a toy. But it's not a toy. It's a stick of dynamite. Alvy quickly realizes it's a bomb. He blows out the fuse, makes an explosion sound with his mouth and runs away. Otis hears the sound and thinks the baby is gone, so he starts celebrating. But suddenly, he gets a giant bone as a reward, which is actually another bomb made by Alvy. It explodes. Luckily, Otis survives because of the mask's powers, but even after this, he doesn't give up. He sets up a new plan using a crane and rope to kidnap the baby. Later that day, Otis enters the house ready to carry out his plan. At that moment, Tim sees Otis wearing the mask and carrying weapons, and faints immediately from shock. Otis ignores him and goes to the baby's room. Using a rope, he climbs to the ceiling and lowers himself into the crib. He attaches a clamp to Alvy's diaper and prepares to lift him out of the house. But just before he turns on the crane, Alvy sneaks behind him and attaches the clamp to Otis's collar instead. When Otis activates the crane, he is the one who goes flying. Tim wakes up and tries to help, but it's too late. Otis crashes through the air ducts, hits the ceiling fan, flies out of the house, comes back in, falls into a dirty bathtub, gets dragged into a birdhouse, and finally ends up inside a washing machine. After all this chaos, Otis is completely exhausted. Alvy blows at him like a balloon, sending him flying out of the window. This time, Otis loses the mask and returns to normal. But now, the house is almost destroyed. Even then, Tim continues doing his father duties and gets ready to change Alvy's diaper. Just then, someone knocks at the door. It's Loki disguised as a delivery man. He hands Tim a package, and while Tim goes to open it, he unknowingly leaves the baby alone with Loki. Loki quickly uses this chance to observe Alvy, but since the baby is acting completely normal, Loki thinks he made a mistake and decides to leave. At the same time, Tim opens the package and suddenly, a giant boxing glove shoots out and punches him straight in the face, knocking him unconscious. A few minutes later, Tim wakes up and, now completely desperate, decides to take Alvy to a pediatrician. He puts the baby in the car because he's convinced something is seriously wrong with him. But while driving, Alvy suddenly spins his head all the way backward and then throws up a strange green liquid all over the car. Tim is horrified. What he doesn't know is that Loki is still nearby watching everything. And when he sees Alvy's powers, he finally understands the truth. This is the son of the Mask. A few minutes later, Tim reaches the children's hospital and runs inside with Alvy. Loki follows him, but parks his car in a handicapped space. A police officer comes up to him, but Loki doesn't even argue. He simply knocks the officer out and slams his head onto the ground. Then Loki appears right in front of Tim and demands the mask. Tim swears that he has no idea where it is, but Loki doesn't believe him and pulls out a giant axe. Just then, Odin takes control of a guard's body and scolds Loki. Tim uses this moment to escape with Alvy, but Loki quickly breaks free and blocks their path by creating a huge iron wall. Then he makes a giant suitcase appear, and from inside it, he pulls out an enormous grenade and throws it at them. Luckily, Alvy stretches his arms and turns them into a shield, protecting both of them from the explosion. Tim is shocked by what his son can do, but Loki is not done yet. He turns into his true form and creates a massive fireball. But just as he's about to throw it, Odin suddenly takes control of Tim's body and fires electric energy through him, removing Loki's godly powers. Seconds later, Alvy joins the fight. He stretches his arms like rubber, smashes Loki between two trash cans, and throws him inside one of them. For a moment, everything feels safe again, but that peace doesn't last long. Tim gets a call from his boss telling him to come to the studio immediately for his project presentation. In panic, Tim rushes to the TV station carrying Alvy in his arms, but when he gets there, he has nothing ready to show. So the producers fire him on the spot and throw him out. Later, Tim calls Tanya and tells her everything that happened. Even after such a horrible day, he admits that he's happy he got to spend time with his son. After the call, Tim gives Alvy a bath, puts him to bed, and they both fall asleep. But that night, Loki returns. He sneaks into the house and walks into the baby's room. Looking at Alvy in his crib, Loki draws strange symbols on the wall and summons Odin. He tells Odin that this baby is the true son of the Mask and begs him to give his powers back. Odin agrees, but gives Loki only 1 hour to recover the mask and fix everything. Once Loki gets his powers back, he starts his plan. At that exact moment, the neighbor shows up outside and starts shouting. Loki scares her by turning his head into a giant nose. The noise wakes Tim, who rushes to Alvy's crib, but when he looks inside, instead of his baby, he sees Loki's face. Then he hears Tanya's voice, but that's Loki too, in disguise. Finally, Loki reveals his real plan. He tells Tim to find the mask and bring it to the alley within 1 hour, or he will never see his son again. After saying this, Loki grabs Alvy and escapes through the roof. Seconds later, Tanya arrives home and sees the house completely destroyed. Tim, still shaken, mistakes her for Loki and attacks her by accident. But when he realizes it's really Tanya, he apologizes and tells her everything. Of course, she doesn't believe him, until the neighbor shows up with a giant nose. Now Tanya understands that Tim was telling the truth, so both of them quickly decide what to do next. They must find Otis, because he's the only one who knows where the magical mask is hidden. Meanwhile, Otis has already found the mask again and is wearing it. He's even having a romantic moment with a neighborhood dog. Tim finally finds him and somehow manages to convince Otis to help save Alvy. Otis agrees, removes the mask, and gives it to Tim. At the same time, in a dark alley, Loki is playing with Alvy while testing his powers against the babies. They even imagine a Wild West-style duel. Loki pulls out a fake revolver and fires first, but Alvy's gun turns out to be real. He shoots Loki, not to hurt him, but just to scare him. Loki laughs at the joke, but just then, Tim and Tanya arrive. They offer Loki a deal, the mask in exchange for their baby. Loki agrees, but at the very last second, he breaks the deal and decides to keep Alvy anyway. Suddenly, Otis jumps forward and bites Loki, causing the mask to fly into the air. Tim jumps up, catches it, puts it on, and transforms into the mask again. Loki tries to escape, but Tim uses his powers to turn his car into a super machine. Tanya and Otis jump inside, and they start chasing Loki at full speed. To stop them, Loki flips a lever that makes the road rise like giant moving waves. But Tim keeps going and continues the chase. Realizing he can't escape, Loki heads toward a boxing arena and challenges Tim to a fight. Tim accepts. The two start fighting. Loki manages to knock Tim down, but Tim fights back, traps Loki inside a suitcase, shuts it tight, and throws it into the sea. Everything finally seems calm. Tim reunites with Tanya, who has found Alvy locked inside a cage. She frees him, and the three of them try to escape. But suddenly, Loki returns and blocks their path with a giant brick wall made by a magical pencil. Tim tries to attack him using toy weapons, but Loki turns them into flowers. Then Loki attacks Tim with a giant pencil, but Tim uses a massive sharpener to break it. Even then, Loki comes back again. Seeing that the fight will never end, Loki suggests that the baby should decide who he wants to be with. He tries to impress Alvy with games and tricks, but then Tim does something unexpected. He removes the mask. Tim tells his son that because of him, he has become a better man, and that he is proud to be his father. Hearing this, Alvy says, "Daddy," for the first time, and chooses Tim and Tanya over Loki. But Loki refuses to accept defeat. He summons a giant hammer to crush them all. Tim tries to protect his family and lifts the hammer, but Loki makes drills come out of it, hurting him. Just when everything seems lost, Odin appears. He says that Loki's time is up and prepares to punish him for everything he has done. But Tim asks Odin to forgive Loki because that's what a father should do. Odin is moved by his words. So instead of punishing Loki, Odin forgives him and takes him back to the world of the gods. Before leaving, Odin also takes the magical mask so it can never cause trouble again. The next day, Tim visits his old boss and shows him a brand new cartoon idea based on everything he went through with his son. This time, his boss loves it. Together, they create a new animated show that becomes a huge success. That night, during the premiere, Tim celebrates with his family. And just then, Tanya shares another big surprise. She's pregnant again.